Rick Henson's car ran out of gas on his way to see his ill mother. He was depressed since he was stranded on a highway with no one in close sight, and he didn't think he'd be able to see his mother. But then an elderly woman stepped in to help him, and she was soon rewarded for her generosity. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. It might brighten their day and inspire them to do good. Also keep watching because an important lesson awaits at the end of the video. I'm sorry to say this, Rick's mom's Dr. Carter said over the phone. Mrs. Henson's health is failing. I'd advise you to come as soon as possible, else we're afraid you won't see her again. What? Rick panicked. But Mr. Carter, my mom was okay until last week. How could it even happen? We had also thought she was improving, Rick, but her body is no longer responding to the treatment. In fact, I don't think she has much time, so I just felt it was best to notify you, Mr. Carter said before hanging up. Rick's heart dropped to the ground. His mother was dying, and he might never get another chance to see her. He had to get to her, and he would do anything to do so. He dropped everything, got into his car, and fed the hospital's location into Google Maps. Unfortunately, the hospital was a little out of the way, an hour away if there was no traffic. But having been born and raised in California and later settling down with a career there, Rick knew a shorter path through the freeway that would help him get there faster. He grabbed the wheel and drove as fast as he could, but in the process he completely ignored the fuel indicator, which implied that his car was about to run out of gas, until he was already on the highway with no one in sight. He managed to park the car by the side of the road. Darn it! He punched the steering wheel in anger and alighted from the car. There was a strange eeriness all around and not a single soul in sight. He checked his phone for the nearest fuel station, and it was miles away. However, he noticed a convenience store nearby. It wasn't a long walk, and he decided to ask for help there. Around 15 minutes later, when he arrived there, he saw two men, tall and both clad in black, just exiting the store. He quickly went up to them. "Hey man," he said, "could you spare me some of your gas? I'm on my way to see my mother. She's sick, but my car ran out of gas." The two men exchanged a quick glance and laughed. "Sorry, boy. We can't help your mama. We ain't doing charity here." "No, please," Rick begged. "I can give you whatever cash I have, all right. Please, it's kinda urgent." "Get lost," one of them retorted. "We aren't helping you, creep." Rick was at a loss. He stormed into the convenience store and asked several people for help, but it didn't take them long to turn him down. He was anxious at this point, terrified that he would never see his mother again. He walked out of the store and slumped against the wall, feeling helpless. Just then, his attention was drawn to an elderly woman who had dropped her medication on the ground. Rick assisted her in picking it up, and she thanked him. "Oh, thank you very much, young man. I've become so frail," she sighed. "This fever is getting to me. I should inform my doctor that this medication isn't working for me." "Ma'am, can you please do me a favor?" Rick asked her suddenly. "Yes. I'm on my way to see my mother, but my car, it ran out of gas. Could you please share some of your gas with me?" "Oh, I would help you," she said hesitantly, "but I have to see my doctor. I'm sorry, I need to go." She began walking, but Rick persisted. "Please, ma'am, it might be the last time I see my mother. Please," he begged. Suddenly, the woman stopped. "What?" She gave him a concerned look. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "She is really critical. Could you kindly assist me?" "Of course I would. Come with me." The woman offered to drive Rick to his car. Rick thanked her and ran to the convenience shop to purchase a siphon pump and container before they proceeded to his car. After siphoning off some gas from the old lady's tank, he thanked her again, tears welling up in his eyes at the woman's generosity. "What's your kind name, ma'am?" Olivia Mitchell," she replied. "Thank you, ma'am," Rick said, settling into his car. "I will never forget what you did for me." All right, now leave. Your mother is waiting for you." Rick thanked her once more and drove to the hospital as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mitchell's doctor had unpleasant news for her a few days later. Mrs. Mitchell, the doctor said solemnly, I'm afraid the fever won't go away with ordinary medication. You must be admitted, and you really need the surgery. That's the only way to get rid of the inflammation in your brain. But doctor, she began to cry. I don't have money for it. My insurance won't cover it. Can you give me some time? Just one day, Mrs. Mitchell. You've been putting it off for a long time. Mrs. Mitchell nodded, masking her tears, and she sobbed on the hospital bed. She was well aware that she would be unable to pay for the procedure. Later, the ringing of her phone diverted her attention. She sat on the bed and answered the call. Hello? Who's this? She asked, trying her best not to sound like she'd been crying an ocean. Am I speaking to Mrs. Olivia Mitchell? Yes. Good day, Mrs. Mitchell. This is Anton Scotliff, the manager of New Indus Bank. A sum of $125,000 has been credited to your account. Do you want to? Before the bank manager could finish his sentence, Mrs. Mitchell cut him off. What? She was on the verge of dropping the phone. Who sent it to me? She asked. Well, ma'am, the transfer was made by Sunrise Enterprises. Also, we had recently received an application for a loan from you, but we turned it down since you didn't meet the requirements. Are you still interested in taking it? Oh, no, it's fine. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell replied and hung up. She didn't know who the angel was who had sent her the money in such dire circumstances, but she was grateful. She used the money to pay for her surgery. One morning, after the surgery, she was walking in her hospital room on her cane when she suddenly noticed someone on the threshold of her hospital room, a man with a beautiful bouquet in his hand. It didn't take long for Mrs. Mitchell to recognize who he was. How are you, Mrs. Mitchell? Rick inquired as he walked into her room. Oh, it's you. How is your mother doing, dear? How did you find out I was in this hospital? Unfortunately, Mrs. Mitchell, my mother, passed away, he revealed. However, because of you, I was able to see her one final time and spend some time with her. Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. It's all right, Mrs. Mitchell, Rick said. I suppose that's how life goes. I know my mother is beaming proudly at me from above. I hope she's content there. Oh, yes, she is. You were a wonderful son to her. You know, I was in desperate need of money recently, and someone made an anonymous deposit to my account. I'm sure whoever did that was a kind soul like you. I wish I could meet that person and express my gratitude. By the way, I didn't get your name. I've become so forgetful. I'm Rick Henson. So Rick, how did you find me? I mean, how did you know I was here? My mom was admitted to this hospital, Mrs. Mitchell. One day, when I was passing by your room, I overheard your doctor talking to you, so I decided to help you. Rick smiled, and Mrs. Mitchell realized what he was trying to say. The elderly lady couldn't hold back her tears. It was you. Oh my God. Thank you very much, child. My husband and son died in a house fire many years ago, and I have no one else to help me. Thank you very much, but I'm not sure how I'm going to repay you. Well, you can actually. I don't have anyone to call family now that I've lost my mother, so I was wondering if you'd be interested in moving in with me. What do you think? The older woman sobbed and wrapped her arms around him. Rick, you're a wonderful person. Thank you very much. After Mrs. Mitchell was discharged, she sold her house and moved in with Rick in his mansion. Rick is the CEO of Sunrise Enterprises, by the way.